You may not agree with our research, but know this. We exploited hell and its resources because it was in mankind's best interest to do so. What you now see in this facility is the cost of progress. But none of that matters now.
Hello greater YouTube area and the surrounding internet regions, this is Killer Cardinal DA7. A few weeks ago I discussed the protests going on in the NFL, players kneeling during the national anthem to protest racial injustice and police brutality. In that video I mentioned how we all need to maintain some ability to take breaks and escape once in a while, despite also needing to spend more time thinking about the suffering of others. Well, along with the hurricanes blasting Houston and Puerto Rico recently, a massive earthquake in Mexico, as if all that suffering wasn't bad enough, this past Sunday a man named Stephen Paddock, 64 years of age, opened fire from a hotel overlooking a Jason Aldean concert in Las Vegas, Nevada, killing about 60 people, injuring over 500. Clearly even escaping to a concert gets people killed these days. Already people are reacting in the expected ways. Even though photos of Stephen Paddock show him to be as white as a cloud, ISIS is claiming responsibility. I see lots of people on social media sending, quote, thoughts and prayers. As little a fan of organized religion as I am, I think this gesture should at least be appreciated, although I do see where some are coming from by railing on those praying for others to take action, when they could be doing something physical and real like sending money or donating time or engaging in actual discussions to figure out an actionable solution. And then we hit the gun control issue. I'll give you a moment to stew on that. Even just saying the words gun and control in the same sentence, never mind hyphenated like I did in my script here, evokes a for or against defensive stance for most people hearing it. Either you think it'll save humanity or it's the most ridiculous, unconstitutional thing imaginable. Many thought it had hit a fever pitch last June when Omar Mateen killed 50 people at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. I mentioned that instance in particular because it's a good reference point to how people are acting now. The response from the public last year was more divided, impulsive, judgmental, and overall counterproductive than I could have ever expected, and I feel like it's happening all over again as we speak. In that instance last June, two sides sprung up. I know, shocker. Big problem occurs in America and it turns into a red versus blue double dare with Mark Summers sort of deal, but okay. In that instance, there were two sides in the Pulse nightclub shooting situation. People who saw it as a direct institutional attack on the LGBT community, and people who thought their weapons were that much closer to being taken away from them. Like with many other issues and events, I understand where both sides were coming from, and even though I didn't think either side was completely overreacting, their actual responses were extremely misdirected, getting nowhere closer to any real prevention, agreement, understanding, or even just some reasonable, level-headed middle ground. Since very little concrete or reliable information about Stephen Paddock has come out thus far, I want to talk about the Pulse nightclub shooting a bit. I know it happened last year, but America has had some time to simmer on it, which, should have prepared us for Las Vegas, but obviously it didn't, not by a long shot. So as I said, on one side you had people thinking the Pulse nightclub shooting was a targeted and purposeful slaying with no other reason than hatred and bigotry. I saw one tweet that read, quote, "Let's not pretend this wasn't all about American homophobia." I remember thinking when I read that, what the fuck does that even mean? So I tried breaking it down. American homophobia. Does that mean homophobia that is some patented American version because other countries don't have their own brand of homophobia? America's is just the biggest and best? That's doubtful. It's at least illegal to kill people for being gay in America. It's not only not illegal in some other countries, it's encouraged in some other countries to kill people for being gay. Wikipedia says about Chechnya, for example, quote, "In addition, there are few protections for LGBT citizens, and the government encourages the killing of people suspected of homosexuality by their families." And that's just one country. I'm not saying homophobia in America isn't still a major problem, just that American homophobia in particular is probably the least threatening of all the homophobia on Earth, at least by comparison to other places. Does it mean Americans specifically who are homophobic? What type of Americans are we talking about? There are fabulous gay hubs all over this nation, certainly not those Americans, right? Pulse itself was a gay nightclub. The shooter in that case was of Middle Eastern descent. He's alleged to have been a closeted homosexual himself. Wikipedia says he was born in New York, and in 2006 he changed his last name from Mir Sadiq to Mateen to match his parents. He apparently bullied girls in school. The United States Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs uncovered deleted social media posts of his that said, quote, "The real Muslims will never accept the filthy ways of the West. You kill innocent women and children by doing us airstrikes. Now taste the Islamic State vengeance." Another one, "America and Russia stop bombing the Islamic State." And another, "In the next few days you will see attacks on the Islamic State in the USA. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to turn this video into a Let's Hate Muslims rally or jumping on the Trump travel ban train. These posts by Mateen may not have linked him to being aligned with ISIS, but if one of Omar's posts is to be believed, he did what he did as a statement because of the drone strikes going on in the Middle East and surrounding regions that came from America. Plus, if Omar had truly embraced being American as opposed to either a religious culture that looks down on homosexuality, a harshly strict home life and family upbringing that may have also looked down on homosexuality, or both, both, he would have realized he could have been whatever he wanted in America. He would have embraced the groups of inclusive, accepting people here in the US and been whatever version of himself that he wanted. If he had embraced being American, he would have learned to tolerate others even if he doesn't see eye to eye with them. Instead, he committed a horrific act in the name of teaching America a lesson. Omar Mateen also had allegations of domestic abuse against his spouses and for some reason was legally able to purchase firearms with that on his record. Not to mention he met both wives, neither of which he lasted long with, through, per Wikipedia, MySpace and an online dating site. This isn't to judge people who meet others online. I've done plenty of it myself. I'm a huge advocate of it, even though only a sliver has actually turned out to be productive for me. Point is, those relationships can go sour sometimes easier than face-to-face meetings. It says a lot about the person doing it. So there is way more to discuss about the Pulse nightclub shooting than simply American homophobia. I'll repeat, I'm not saying homophobia here in America isn't a problem, but to tweet that missed so much of that particular story. Then we have the opposing side of that situation as well as this newest one. The side that constricts in fear that their weapons will be ripped unceremoniously from their hands as more and more mass shootings occur, presumably leaving thousands of middle-class to rich heterosexual white males completely vulnerable to attack from all angles. Somewhere. They're extremely vulnerable from somewhere. Someone's going to attack them eventually, and they have a right to defend themselves. Middle class to rich heterosexual white males are getting attacked every single day. Their homes are being invaded constantly, and they need protection. The Constitution clearly says that people can own high-powered rifles all in the name of self and home defense. Even though the problem isn't the self and home defense aspect, it's the using high-powered rifles to kill 60 innocent people aspect. In sports terminology, the problem isn't defense, okay? It's offense. I know it distinctly says all this in the Constitution. Here it is, Second Amendment. The right to bear arms. Arms, to those who aren't aware, is complicated government legalese that equals high-powered rifles our forefathers couldn't possibly have conceived with their primitive brains, along with every possible modification upgrade the future could conjure up. Look, if you happen to find yourself in this group, and this little parody resembles your stance even a little, and even if you aren't actually arming up for the apocalypse and you just want a couple weapons to keep yourself safe, which I'm honestly and truly not opposed to, all joking or jabs aside, hundreds if not thousands of people are killed every year in vicious mass shootings. I'm not trying to imply random responsible gun owners are solely to blame. I'll explain near the end of the video what both good gun owners and those afraid of gun violence can do to help if they really want to. However, when mass shootings occur, it's shocking to me that the knee-jerk reaction is always predictably the same. Immediately pull back to the defensive, passionately defend the NRA, surgically pick apart liberal-leaning articles by claiming the shooter wasn't actually using an assault rifle, they were actually using a semi-auto long rifle, which is technically okay by law, like what happened the other day. Hillary Clinton tweeted this: "The crowd fled at the sound of gunshots. Imagine the deaths the shooter had a silencer, which the NRA wants to make easier to get." People all over felt like such big shots when they responded. First of all, it's not called a silencer, it's a suppressor, and second, it doesn't silence anything, it just reduces decibels to that of a jackhammer. Okay, first of all, anyone saying that knew exactly what Hillary meant by silencer. Instead of admitting that giving everyone easier access to suppressors would unquestionably make it easier for someone planning to kill as many people as possible to do just that, the response is to defend the guns. Second of all, if they're not called silencers, someone might want to tell that to Silencer Co., a company that manufactures those things. Clearly they didn't get the memo. One of their cover images says, quote, "How to buy a silencer." It says silencer right at the top of the fucking website, and if you click that drop down menu, numerous item descriptions say like the Harvester rifle silencer. The Harvester 338 is one of the lightest 338 Lapua Magnum silencers in existence, weighing only 22 ounces. Apparently this site supports a cause called Fight the Noise. Check this out, quote, "Fight the Noise is a movement to regain our voice, to exercise our right to protect our hearing and silence the sound, to be responsible gun owners and be treated as such. We want law-abiding citizens to have the ability to purchase and own silencers without being subjected to excessive wait times, paperwork, and taxes. We are the silent majority, and it is our time to be heard. We are your friends, we are your coworkers, we are the suppressed." Boy, that's a fuck of a pile of typos, huh? And lastly, I'm sorry, even the in-passing claim about it equating the volume to that of a jackhammer. I've been near one or two jackhammers, and many of you out there have as well. When nothing's going on around them, yeah, jackhammers are kind of loud, but from the distance Stephen Paddock was from the crowd, while the victims were at a loud rock concert, that's a significant drop in decibels, right? I've been in a regular, normal little car, engine on, windows rolled up, and I had trouble hearing a jackhammer that was practically next to me. Even if the shooting started between songs with all the talking and cheering and commotion, it's got to be masked somewhat. There's no way it wasn't. Just excuse after hollow defense. When people get that defensive to that degree, seeing real people die on video, and then the immediate response is just to defend the NRA and guns before showing any real emotion or sadness for the people who were killed, how does that look to you? In many liberal circles, gun owners have an image of being unstable, dangerous maniacs who fetishize their weapons and compensate for severe inferiority complexes. Now, I don't inherently look at all gun owners like that. I know a couple Well, personally, that description isn't even close. But when that many people die in a shooting and either gun owners, conservatives, or both pull that far back out of the fray and protect their weapons sooner than they offer any real aid outside of prayers and thoughts, or even just agree that more change needs to happen to protect more people, ask yourself how that reaction presents a better, healthier image for gun owners. 60 people die, conservatives huddle in the corner with their guns praying, and people are supposed to view them as what? Empathetic, caring, feeling, sensitive. I'm not seeing any of those emotions in the reaction I described anywhere. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe conservatives huddling in the corner praying with their guns don't want to seem like they have feelings. I was convinced of that months ago when I did a video on it. Conservatives believe, liberals do the feeling. Okay, great. Let me clarify my own stance here. I support gun control. But of course, like any statement that's pro or con, saying that is fucking useless without defining it. So I'm going to do what others who support gun control should always do and define what I personally mean when I say I support gun control. Do I mean deeper background checks? Yeah, much deeper. Get government databases involved if need be. Widespread access to them by stores or places of business that ensure people on the banned list are easily identified. Expanding what that banned list entails in terms of particular weapons or particular traits that get a person on the list? Absolutely. I mentioned Omar Mateen earlier, how he had instances of domestic abuse on his record. Perfect example of someone who should not legally be allowed to buy a gun. Not because he attacked women specifically, but because something like, this dude's violent, maybe he shouldn't be allowed to purchase deadly weapons should maybe be a thing we all agree to, even if it sounds completely stupid obvious. If it's not already being done, and it might be, requiring stores that carry firearms to look up a person to see if they've served time or if they're on a probation or other such things before allowing a transaction to sell that person any weapon. There's another good idea. I've heard that gun shows tend to get around a lot of that. We could use some serious monitoring and regulating by government or law enforcement there, since we're dealing with tools that can kill someone by flicking your finger across a switch. How about regular psychological evaluations? I like that idea. Psych evaluations could potentially weed out some unstable folks ready to snap. If people say they want weapons for self-defense, why not have to prove you've been attacked or your home has been invaded to show you have a legit reason for wanting more protection? That probably sounds silly, but what sounds crazier to you? Making it harder for safe people to get access to weapons they don't need? Or taking the time to deduce if a person who wants an arsenal to protect themselves from a threat that doesn't exist is actually safe or not? Honestly, most people, even those who don't own guns, could use regular psych evaluation. I've considered myself pretty level-headed in my life, but lately I could probably use a bit of looking at. If we're busy evaluating people's psyches, why not other tests like weapon maintenance, operation, assembly, disassembly, basic daily care? Hell, even target shooting tests to show you actually know how to handle and fire that weapon most effectively, even potentially less lethally, if you happen to be into not killing people. In fact, tell you what, last of my ideas, this might be my favorite one. Remember how I said gun owners seem to have a problem with showing people how empathetic they are? Why not make gun ownership or owning particular types of guns some degree of incentive for public service? You donate time to charities, you volunteer helping the less fortunate, you help build your community, you spend enough time actually helping people, you can purchase specific types of weapons, perhaps deadlier ones. How much is it worth to you to have that kind of power? Anyone can gather up the funds to buy weapons outright, legally or illegally. What better way to show the community you legitimately care about helping and protecting them and to actually help and protect their quality of daily life? See, what I love about this part of the discussion is that I don't even need to see a hardcore conservative or gun owner listening to what I'm suggesting to know that most likely think these ideas are completely unconstitutional, ludicrous, unfair, and unnecessary. There should be a similar issue as things like the Patriot Act and granting the government the ability to invade our privacies. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't have any issue. How is that any different here? Are you a law-abiding citizen? Are you level-headed enough to not misuse a deadly weapon? Are you responsible in how well you care for it? Are you a benevolent enough person to use that weapon in ways that benefit the community along with yourself? If you answered yes to one or most of these questions, then jumping through these hoops should be no issue if you want a particular weapon bad enough. I think some people see themselves as smart enough, knowledgeable enough, and obviously level-headed enough already to own any weapon they want, and they shouldn't have to go through any additional steps because 5 words in a document written hundreds of years ago is grounds to justify all of us as trustworthy. I think some people are afraid they may not meet some required level of mental health and gun knowledge, and if they deem that level arbitrary or unfairly weighted, then they get to make it personal. The idea that freedom isn't free is okay to throw around when we send our military to other countries to kill other people, but when it comes to looking at what American citizens are allowed to do, it's become taboo to even think that I can't have the most badass weaponry imaginable to protect myself from, threats, hostiles, bad guys. To be fair here, as much as I fully support and believe in all the gun control methods I mentioned a moment ago, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Those things don't work 100%. I know what you're thinking. You just proved yourself wrong, LOL. Not quite. I detailed the things I want to see put in place. I never said they were the end-all be-all to the complete solution. Truth is, I acknowledge that checking backgrounds, administering regular psych evals, testing people on how well they operate a weapon, even requiring public service before you're allowed to purchase, all that together doesn't ensure 100% that innocent people are kept safe from either people who have the potential for criminal activity, people who want to go around the law in order to get weapons specifically because they're banned, nor does it prevent responsible gun owners from turning into lunatics due to drastic sweeping changes that could make any reasonable person flip out. Family life goes sour, your finances finances plummet and you either go bankrupt or you live in a low-income area and you've never had much money in your life and you need to turn to crime to pay your bills. You can't find people online to talk to. Maybe you lose your job or career, which provides both money and the satisfaction of completing one's duties, which is necessary for solid mental health. Any of these things can turn an average sane person without a care in the world into an unstable, shaky, jittery wreck. So yes, I fully acknowledge there are responsible gun owners. I have no doubt about that. Many gun owners aren't just responsible, they're also extremely disciplined. They study weapons inside and out. They know how they work. They're crack shots and they have great initiative to pull when danger occurs. But can we at least agree that more people's mental states, likely not even just gun owners, but people who don't own guns as well, should be assessed more often and more aggressively? Someone who's never even seen a gun can be tempted to go get their first one under enough pressure. Someone who already owns a gun, well, depending on their pressure, they may already have their solution. I acknowledge that there are a lot of people, most of them are liberal-minded, who judge gun owners solely on that one fact, and that's a bit unfair. But circumstances in people's lives can change in the blink of an eye. People who seem entirely sane one minute, they got their shit together one minute, they're the most level-headed human you've ever known one minute, shit gets crazy, everything changes. They become a completely new person. How are people afraid of gun violence supposed to know who the sane ones are and who the crazy ones are? Especially if people aren't communicating openly and they're just sniping, no pun intended, over social media from defensive stances and just hating each other. Different type of example than a mass shooting. Let's go back 13 years to December 8th, 2004, Columbus, Ohio. Alrosa Villa was the venue where Damage Plan, the side project of Vinnie Paul and Dimebag Darrell, one half of the legendary heavy metal band Pantera, was playing a set with Shadows Fall and The Haunted. An ex-Marine, Nathan Gale, shot Dimebag Darrell in the head 5 times with the 9mm Beretta 92 FS, and do you know what he was alleged to have been screaming when he did? You broke up Pantera. Let me go over some of the key facts just in case I was speaking a bit fast for you. An ex-Marine. So we're talking about a former military man here. Some of you might refer to him as a hero. He charged the stage at a concert. Sound familiar? Another concert? With a pistol. Not a rifle like Omar and Steven used, a handgun. To kill a guitar player, allegedly for breaking up a band. And if I remember reading some pieces written around that time, Pantera was slowly but surely inching their way back together, maybe for a reunion concert or something. I recall them being pretty close. I could be wrong about that. Apparently, investigations into Gale found no attempts to contact other Pantera members, so there's some doubt about his real motive. But even so, 5 total people died at that venue, one of them Gale himself. It wasn't a terrorist act. It wasn't a result of religious fundamentalism. Nathan Gale saw that shit as personal as it comes. He saw that shit as personal when it was anything but. His problem was personal. His emotion was personal, and yet people argue about what to do with the inanimate object, not the actual person pulling the trigger. Not enough people talk about what to do to help people with those problems, how to eliminate the stigma, fear, and anxiety, and acknowledge when people have mental issues or are on the brink of making really awful decisions to deal with what they want. Even if Nathan Gale had some real love for Pantera's music, bordering on unnatural love, some worship or appreciation for the band and the attitude and the vibe they gave off that was far more passionate than other people, it moved him in ways other music was never able to, and the band breaking up really bothered him that much, there had to have been someone, a friend, a doctor, psychologist, somebody who could have channeled his discomfort or upset into some other activity or helped him figure out how to compartmentalize that emotion so it was easier to handle. Some way for him to feel comfortable enough to express it. Some way to defeat his fear that people would think he was nuts for feeling this distraught over a band being broken up. Even if he wasn't diagnosed as, quote, mentally ill, and he just made a couple bad decisions, he still killed a band member, and 3 other people besides him and Darrell died that day. So yes, when mass shootings occur and liberal types jump up and scream, gun control, and don't adequately research what really needs to be banned, what mods and weapons really need to be regulated to make the most impact, and they don't clearly define what they mean by gun control at all, many look like impulsive crazy people not displaying any real knowledge about what they want to legislate. I'll admit I don't know much either, but I'm still managing to tackle all this with a cooler head. Many liberals need to be more educated on what terms to use, and many who stick to the idea that guns are the root of the whole problem need to accept that even if we implement the strictest possible gun control laws, it won't prevent every person who has the deadliest of intentions from getting around those laws. I'm not saying we shouldn't have any gun laws or restrictions at all. Laws aren't the only step we need. Some people have been mentioning the Port Arthur massacre lately. Link to an article about it is in the description. If you haven't heard about it, in Australia in 1996, a guy with semi-automatic rifles killed 35 people in a cafe and injured more than 20 others, prompting the Prime Minister to pass new gun control laws, introducing a sweeping ban on automatic and semi-automatic weapons and pump-action shotguns. Thousands of weapons were turned in and destroyed. Stricter registration was put into place for owning and licensing, and allegedly there hasn't been a mass shooting in Australia since. That was 21 years ago. Homicides and suicides by guns are also allegedly down by half as well. Honestly, I'm not really opposed to trying the same bans here in America. However, the population of Australia is 24 million, while in the US it's around 319 million. So yeah, I agree with the idea of banning weapons, just like my own ideas from before. It sounds fine on paper, but given the difference in size and the amount of people, it may not work as well as a country with a different overall culture. It's far easier to get 24 million people on the same page and agree on what needs to be done than 13 times that many. I think the part of the fear that seems most rational is that people are getting weapons legally and then performing illegal acts with them. them, right? Many of the debates about gun control try to determine if the rifles or mods that Omar Mateen or Stephen Paddock used should be legal or not, but Nathan Gale used a fucking pistol. He may not kill 50 or 60 people, but legal weapons are still a danger. I'm not saying Berettas should now be banned, obviously not, they're just little handguns, but if 5 people can die because of one dude's actions, clearly the type of weapon isn't as important as the people themselves. I linked in the description an article by grunge.com citing celebrities including Dimebag Darrell that were killed by, quote, fans. Some of them, like Selena, were killed pretty long before social media and internet were as big a facet in our daily lives. Put yourself in a shooter's shoes for 1 minute. If you're planning on committing a mass shooting and you want to go big, you'll need a big or at least fast weapon. If you could get the weapon you wanted legally, great, but if no legal course to get that particular weapon is available, you're telling me there aren't any other avenues? If you've hit a point in your life where killing 60 people is the only solution for you, it won't matter if Walmart doesn't carry automatic weapons or high-powered rifles. You're not likely going to Walmart for what you need anyway. The chance they'll have that big and strong enough a gun to do the job isn't all that likely. It won't matter that licensed gun stores don't carry deadly enough weapons. Just Google how to find illegal weapons. Sounds stupid, but why not? I probably spend more time looking up Wikipedia articles and videos to make points about political issues than it would take an average person to follow links to actually getting hold of an illegal weapon. Doesn't help that our president is making it easier to get them either. After only 4 months of his presidency, Donald Trump rolled back firearm restrictions on people with mental health conditions and who receive disability benefits. This kicked up a firestorm of debate as many people were already starting to entertain the idea of not always associating mass shootings and crimes involving multiple deaths with being mentally ill. However, when Trump did this, the widespread fear was that more firearms would find themselves in the hands of unstable people. Defending the rights and securities of mentally ill people typically seems like a liberal stance when it comes to how they're treated by doctors or society, but even liberals weren't in favor of mentally ill people having easier access to firearms. That's because it's not an issue of sensitivity or respecting people. It's about people who may not be of sound enough mind to make good decisions when owning weapons. Stephen Paddock is alleged to not have had any mental health condition from what I've read so far. Apparently he was rich too, made a lot of money gambling. His brother mentioned in several interviews he made a ton through video poker. I'm not trying to imply having tons of cash means your problems whisk away, but there has to be some reason he got to that point, something to shove him off the deep end. I know I've been railing on Trump and conservatives here for not taking appropriate action to make people who are afraid of gun violence feel safer, but liberals aren't just freaking out about bump stock mods, they're doing it in other counterproductive ways as well. For those who haven't been keeping up on her in recent years, actress Rose McGowan has been transforming into something of a militant feminist revolutionary. She commented on Facebook late on Monday, sorry if this is a bit long, but I'm going to quote her whole post. Today I cried for those whose lives have been taken and those whose lives have been irrevocably changed. I'm sick of prayers and crying. I'm sick of us innocents being terrorized by mentally sick white male terrorists. Call it out. Say it loud. The statistics do not lie. They are our ISIS. The news organizations are all participating in a mass lie by not calling it by its name. White male terrorism. Yes, it is uncomfortable to see truth, but worse is a bullet in your flesh. Be brave. We need to call it what it is, otherwise we will never be able to fix the problem. If this terrorist were a black man or an Iraqi that slaughtered so many innocents, do you really think the news organizations would be calling him lone shooter? The answer is no, of course not. By literally whitewashing the problem of white male terrorism, it continues its cancerous growth. We must see and speak the truth. Our lives depend on it. Share this if you are brave, unquote. If this shooting in Las Vegas is being deemed the worst mass shooting in what's being referred to as modern American history, the Pulse nightclub shooting is certainly a very close second, and that was committed by a Middle Eastern man, not a white man. So I don't really agree with the sentiment that this is part of a larger white male terrorist front, nor do I fully understand what Rose is trying to incite. Even if you call all white men terrorists, what is the assumed endgame? Kill all white men? Lock all white men up? Even after the Pulse nightclub and 9/11, I don't think killing, banning, or locking up every Middle Eastern and or Muslim person is the right course of action. But this is part of white male terrorism? Apparently Rose had a major spat with the gay community a few years ago, calling gay men, quote, just as misogynistic as straight men. So apparently Rose has no qualms with calling out all white men regardless of any struggle or marginalization some of them go through. Not to digress too strongly here, but here's a little known fact that you may not be thinking about. If you were to remove all white men from society, things like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, they don't just go away. They don't just vanish because a majority group those things are typically associated with isn't present anymore. Don't believe me? I'll prove it. Ever hear of Huffington Post? Well-known liberal-leaning online publication. Did you hear the story a few years ago when they tweeted a photo with the caption, notice anything about our editorial staff? The photo is highlighting their all-female editorial staff. Okay, cool. All-female editorial staff. That's fine. Oh wait, they were all white women. I don't know any of them, but I'd bet none in the photo were gay or trans, and if they were, they should have probably said so, as they took a shit ton of harsh backlash for implying they were being diverse while not really being so. Another example. Remember the Oscars So White scandal? The Oscars nominated only white actors 2 years in a row recently. The second year it happened, the Oscars decided to attempt to quell some of the racial tension by having Chris Rock host the event. Chris Rock is hilarious, but he's also well known for being being very critical of white people. Seemed like a good idea for the Oscars on paper, right? They nominate only white people. Chris shits on them for it. They get away with it. Well, Chris did a joke making fun of races, seemingly at the expense of Asian people. Asian celebrities coming forward to protest the joke. Margaret Cho via her Facebook page shared an article written by an Asian fella citing how unhappy he was that Asians were apparently some scapegoat when people want to make fun of racism. In both cases, straight white males are nowhere to be found, and in one, wasn't white people at all who did anything. Accusations of racism and sexism were still prevalent. There's a related idea that black people and other people of color can't be racist, that racism is a white thing. Why is that? Because racism is perceived to be all about power. White people are perceived to hold all the power. They hold the highest stations in society. They're higher on some socioeconomic hierarchy, and therefore they can be racist, while people of color are perceived to have no power, and therefore they can't be racist. I agree to the extent that if white people hold some degree of majority in positions of power, like in government, and they put into law policies that unfairly diminish people of color, even if that's not the intention, then okay, racial biases that come from white sources present more urgent problems that we should be cooperating to tackle. That's completely fair. However, removing white people completely from the equation doesn't exterminate deep-rooted racial bias, it doesn't obliterate sexist acts towards females, and it doesn't remove negative treatment of people who are LGBT. It simply allows those negative feelings to change hands to another large group of people that haven't historically been the aggressive majority. That all being said, the idea that the news might cover Stephen Paddock differently if he weren't white is likely. I don't recall it taking long before people were speculating Omar Mateen was part of the larger ISIS/radical Islam problem once his name and picture hit the news, even before his social media posts were revealed. Stephen Paddock was deemed a lone gunman fairly quickly though. I want to throw this out there, and I could be very wrong here, but how many white people who go that far off the rails aren't usually extremely isolated to the point where they are acting like total rogues? I kind of look up to the way many people of color have some base level of faith in others of their own race. Many have had to if they want to present a unified front to get laws passed that benefit them in even basic ways. Otherwise, being a numerical minority leaves them having zero say at all. To be honest, I haven't seen a lot of white people show much community during my lifetime, outside of recently, of course. White nationalists are now banding together more and more, especially since the unrest in Charlottesville back in August. And the scary part of that is, I'm not seeing many conservatives shun those white nationalists as extremists. They're embracing and supporting them because tradition, because free speech, because history, because freedom. All these ideas and concepts people just believe in because they come with the package of being American. So while bringing race into the Las Vegas shooting picture might be missing the exact reason Stephen Paddock did that, maybe Rose McGowan has some point. Maybe Stephen Paddock is a white male terrorist. White males certainly seem to be joining together a lot lately. Then again, for Rose or any of us to call Paddock a terrorist only makes average, everyday, law-abiding conservatives who would vote for a guy like Trump distance themselves from a terrorist even further, as that's not what they think of when they hear the word terrorist. And then we end up arguing over the definition of terrorist, which even further diverts the conversation in a direction it doesn't need to be sent in. We have this problem in America that when you dislike someone or something, you need to find anything that can link that person or thing to a particular label that can be damaging. Therefore, Rose's instinct is to find anything that gives her the ability to call him a terrorist. I'm not even disagreeing with it. A lot of people are terrified now. He's pretty much a goddamn fucking terrorist. I'm not fighting that aspect, but Stephen Paddock continues to look like the insane freak who killed 60 people. He gets to be the extremist. And average people get validation because voting to ban people from entering our country, banning transgender people from serving in the military, not authorizing better care for Puerto Rico and Houston during some of the worst natural disasters we've seen in modern history, that's not as bad as being a mass shooter or serial murderer. The line just gets pushed further back. Now you might be thinking, oh, stop politicizing this. You're just injecting an agenda. Trust me, I'm really trying my best to see the pro-gun side here. I'm trying to see the benefit of everyone packing major hardware every minute of the day. I'm trying to see how everyone can sleep better at night with weapons by their sides at all times. I'm trying to see how a country full of angry, enraged, jittery people who think they're constantly on the defensive needs weapons, and how that will make things better. Most people, even conservatives, will agree that mental health is some type of issue here, even if they disagree with liberals on how exactly it should be implemented or provided. So if mental health is an issue and we have a country full of people feeling backed against the wall, why is the plan to arm them easier? South Park did a great episode at the end of season 19 where practically everyone in town had a gun. Characters were pulling guns on each other over every single little problem, like most South Park episodes did it in a funny way, but man, it was still nuts. That's a hell of a view of the future. A website called newsbusters.org, apparently a site dedicated to exposing liberal bias, talked about it. Link is in the description. And while they tried to frame the episode in a way that said, see, everyone has weapons, no one got shot, they completely missed the idea that it's fucking horrifying that everyone needed weapons in order to diffuse arguments and fights because they were all afraid of getting their heads blown off. I'm sorry, but that's not how healthy communication works. Neither of us want to die, so let's take it easy and put our guns away. Huh, yeah, imagine that. Hey, or we could just learn to be fucking mature and talk problems out instead of our lives needing to be on the line every single second. And then how do you teach that method of talking to people to a child? I completely agree with people who own guns or keep guns in the house. Teaching small children about them at a very young age, teaching them about what they do, how they work, all that's fine. But two parents who are packing get into an argument, they pull on each other, which I guess is what's supposed to happen, their kid sees that. Do you think that kid isn't going to fuck that interaction up at least once? And then how do you interact with superiors? You know, people who are above you, like at work, in law enforcement, in government. You don't like what they say, or you take a parking ticket or a tax audit as some personal judgment or attack. What are you supposed to do? Pull your gun on them? We're just going to solve all problems with weapons? See what I'm doing? I'm going there. I'm looking into situations. None of this shit makes sense to me. Even after this, and acknowledging the majority of gun control laws don't work perfectly, I am still trying to see the benefit, and I'm trying to diffuse some of the liberal frenzy. And I still probably look like some SJW extremist who hates America and hates the flag simply because I'm asking valid questions of both sides. I ask how conservatives can take cover in their safe spaces behind sandbags of tired cliche rhetoric about guns don't kill people, people kill people. How conservatives can shed not a drop of empathy beyond, quote, prayers on social media or in public when mass shootings occur. All they do is defend their rights and their privileges and what they have coming to them when those people who lost their lives, they don't have rights anymore. And I ask how liberals can run around screaming about gun control like non-GMO free-range chickens with their heads humanely cut off, as if somehow stricter laws intended to keep guns out of the hands of lawbreakers going to magically prevent lawbreakers from acquiring tools they need to break the law. Breitbart on Wednesday posted an article, 5 facts about bump stocks people need to know. They posted that because apparently Paddock used one or more bump stocks than what he was firing, and bills are being proposed to make them illegal or harder to get. Liberals think making these harder to get will help somehow. I'll be honest, I don't know shit about guns overall, but I'm pretty goddamn sure focusing in on one particular mod isn't going to solve many problems relating to gun violence. Of the article's 5, quote, facts, the last one, typical leftist war on the poor, might be there solely for triggery effect, but I believe one or two of the others, there are probably other mods that do similar things, and some machine guns are probably legal. So what does making a fuss about bump stocks really do, other than poke and prod at gun owners in the NRA? Like I said, both sides are wildly acting on impulse here, and we need to boil this down. If any of you hearing this right now have even a sliver of interest in coming together in a productive way, please listen to what I want to propose. First, let me address the conservatives, the gun owners, the patriots, the people who think their rights are being infringed by even implying things like safety or regulations. I saw a meme on Facebook last year of Stephen King saying that guns have basically two purposes: target practice at shooting range and hurting and or killing people. To be fair, there's also hunting, but most of us here in civilization do not need to do that. Most people who hunt do it kind of recreationally. Outside of that though, he's pretty much right. You can appreciate weapons for their manufacture and function, but when you own guns that aren't serving simply an antique collection purpose, there is an assumption that eventually you may use them on a human being. You may even hope to use them on a human being. So if people fear you over your appreciation for weapons, please stop taking it so personally. Try to understand that fear, see where it comes from, and prove those fears and assumptions are a bit misguided, as nicely as possible. I've seen plenty of people on social media repost that message about carrying a concealed weapon at the store that says, "You were behind me and didn't even know it, but if you were attacked, you'd be thankful I was there." That's really easily said, not easily done. Especially in this day and age, I'll be honest, I don't trust most people to be a hero and protect my ass in any deadly situation, let alone an overly defensive gun owner who gets pissed anytime anyone claims they're afraid of weapons that are built to harm people. If you yourself own a gun and happen to save my life, or even just kindly offer to give me a personal tutorial someday, go half and half on an educational trip to a firing range, handle some weapons with me one-on-one, teach me something I obviously don't know shit about and admit that I don't know shit about, I'll gladly admit I was wrong. For now, I'm going to be somewhat afraid like a lot of other people, and I don't think there's anything crazy or irrational about that. Fear, like some other emotions, can be faced and defeated. I can't speak for any others, but my mind is opening and facing my fear if others are willing to help with that. If you brag about owning guns and feel compelled to tell people in your community, and you don't feel like reaching out to me because I'm just some random jerk on YouTube, fair enough, then at least do your own community a favor and help those who need defending. Tragedies like Las Vegas and the Pulse nightclub happen, and the first thing many people claim is that the guns aren't responsible, the people are. I'm willing to agree with that. Guns don't do shit unless they're picked up and used. However, saying that suggests that people have more responsibility than the tools they use, and saying that over and over when these things happen doesn't make it any easier for the victims and those fearing more violence. It just makes them think you care more about defending your guns like little children or pets that can't speak for themselves than keeping anyone else safe but yourself. They're afraid of you because all it would take for a problem to go south fast is picking up that gun and flicking a trigger. That may not scare you, but it's scary for other people, and instead of just making fun of them, what might make them feel better is having you comfort them personally, physically coming to their aid, telling to them face to face, I want to be there for you, I want to protect you, I want to keep you safe. But how often does that happen? How often do most gun owners hold town meetings after a mass shooting where a community's most prominent gun owners are stepping up and volunteering to be independent guardians of average citizens who are afraid? I'm not ruling it out. It might happen in some places, not enough to change general consensus though. There are people out there who fear guns to the point of it practically being a phobia. They're not brave enough to even look at one, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being afraid. However, if you are brave enough to own a gun, hold a gun, carry a gun, use a gun, fire a gun, or have many of them in the room with you at the same time, helping those who are afraid of them get over their fears is the best step you can take. And if they still can't bring themselves to look at one, offer your presence. Help them get over that fear too. Not everyone has the same response to tough love or getting smacked around. Sometimes people need a softer hand to guide them. If it means getting more people on your side, I don't see the problem with taking a softer approach to teaching average citizens about your weapons. Welcome people into your personal bubble. Help them understand why you own a gun in the first place. That you too probably feel vulnerable, unsafe, and unprotected at times just like they do. And that you feel safer and more secure with a weapon on you, and assure them that if they still feel uncomfortable having a gun of their own, but they still feel they need help, you're more than happy to give it. Open up the floor to people who feel unsafe. Show them the weapon you own. Give them a class or a demonstration of everything it does, all of its parts, how good care of it you maintain. If they're scared, show it to them. Let them hold it, touch it, see that it's only a tool, and in the right hands it can be used to protect innocent people and keep them safe. You stand to make a better impression on society by breaking down those walls of miscommunication personally, face to face, than by selfishly hunkering down in your bunker like a doomsday prepper, sharing little articles from biased sources on the internet and watching everyone fend for themselves. Earlier in this video and several times during it, I lashed out in a disrespectful manner on purpose to prove a point, and I want to apologize for that somewhat. This week, if not the past year, has impacted many people very deeply in harsh ways, so yeah, I'm sorry in advance for stooping to that level. That type of treatment should be reserved for the people who don't want to act on this and don't want to change their approach and expect people's opinions of them to magically change overnight. If you take these words seriously and we see communities become tighter, then I'll gladly take back every low blow, truly and honorably. Hold me to every word of that. Ball's in your court there. Now I want to address liberals who feel guns need unreasonable restrictions to keep people safe, or at least focusing on the wrong aspects of gun control that don't really solve anything. Guns seem to be the biggest point of contention, and I understand completely why. However, these tragedies have yielded even more talk about gun control than ever. More lines are being drawn in the sand of behavior that's unacceptable, up to and including gun ownership itself. Democratic politicians sat in with Congress last year, a week or two after the Pulse nightclub shooting. They held up processes for an entire day, and per Wikipedia, quote, at the sit-in's conclusion, the protesting members had been unable to force a vote on any of their demanded measures. Nothing fucking changed. All that fervor, all that yelling and screaming and emotion and bickering and arguing on social media, all of it went into a gun control protest with literally no effect. Even if some policies were tweaked or maybe adjusted and we all just didn't notice because it was so subtle, clearly nothing significant changed at all. You can control guns, ban guns, destroy guns, but those things aren't enough to solve the whole problem. They're just one part of it. Timothy McVeigh, the 9/11 hijackers, prisoners all over the world, and many others have killed thousands of people with fertilizer, small blades, and sharp objects fashioned from household items and furniture. Not a single bullet fired. Mass killings weren't born at the same time automatic weapons were. Like I was saying about Australia, I support all those initiatives in principle, but let's face facts. The deaths at Pulse and in Las Vegas wouldn't feel a single bit better had they occurred at the hands of a suicide bomber, a remotely detonated explosive, or a gang of people armed with katanas and box cutters. Those people would still be dead without any bullets, and we'd still mourn all of those lost lives. I know it seems like I'm dissuading the blame from who or what really deserves it a bit, but the truth is, it's all of us. Yeah, I don't feel solely or personally responsible for Pulse or Las Vegas. However, there are ways going forward that I can participate in things getting better. Ways I can be more empathetic and understanding to people with mental illnesses, the LGBT community, gun owners, Trump voters, anyone and everyone, in the hope that those understandings let people know their concerns are being heard, they're being accounted for, and their fears and thoughts are important to at least one other person. Omar Mateen should have been embraced better by his community and his family. I have no clue why Stephen Paddock did what he did as of yet, but isolation and loneliness could have been a problem, along with companionship, satisfaction, purpose. Mental health is something we all deal with, whether we're cognizant of it or not, and whether we get an official diagnosis from a professional or not. If it helps, let's split up the responsibilities among people who have personal interests or stakes in the matters at hand. If conservatives know so much about guns, then let responsible gun owners regulate them. Not the NRA, not politicians, not business people, not ex-cons, but responsible, safe, secure gun owners who perhaps do some of the things I said a moment ago. Gun owners who are willing to embrace their community and help real people deal with these issues and fear head on. And liberals, if conservatives don't want to focus on the mental health issues because it's too new agey or touchy-feely or whatever, that's where you come in. Help people get better treatments, better access to counseling, embrace people who are afraid, and help motivate them to act in safer, more secure ways. Point is, let's cooperate. Watch any disaster movie where the entire planet is being swept into a problem killing millions of people, nuclear wars, zombie hordes, alien invasion, a planet-wide apocalypse, fire and brimstone. In many of those instances, people throw away their daily routines, their prejudices, their judgments, and they come together in solidarity because the basics of human life end up being far more important than the petty arguments we engage in. I'd like to think real life would be the same exact thing, but at what point do you acknowledge that we're closer and closer to hitting that level of crisis every day that goes by? At what exact point does it matter less to prove the other side wrong and more to embrace what they say and kindly work with them to accomplish something real? I know this all sounds like some hippy-dippy, happy-go-lucky bullshit, but it's the truth. None of us are immune to sharing some of the responsibility in some big or small, direct or indirect aspect or another. The more we all look away from these problems, the worse they keep getting. The problem of mass shootings may not go away by every gun owner handing in all their weapons, and it also doesn't go away by arming every citizen with suppressed automatic rifles. We'll never heal every mental illness. New ones will spring up every single day for sure, but by offering more aid and comfort and non-judgmental ears to those who need it, we stand to reduce danger by a large margin. There are a lot more moving parts involved that we all need to maintain in unison for this problem to move forward. I desperately want to do my share. Hopefully clarifying some of this can help some people. Only time will tell. This is Killer Cardinal DA7 reminding you to use your head, be nice to each other, and take time to think. Talk to you later.
I'm willing to take full responsibility for the horrible events of the last 24 hours, but you must understand. Our interest in their world was purely for the betterment of mankind. Everything has clearly gotten out of hand now, yes. But it was worth the risk, I assure you.